Hello, welcome back to Retro Break. I really hope you enjoyed my Akihabara tour video that I uploaded last week. If you haven't seen it already, definitely go and take a look. I'll put a link in the description because in this video I'll be showing you all of the Super Famicom games that I picked up while I was there. Let's get started by taking a look at the first game here that I was very excited to find. It's called Gaia Gensoki, I think, and it's the Japanese version of my favourite game of all time, Illusion of Time. If you didn't already know that it's my favourite game ever, I am planning to do a video on the game and the developer in a lot of detail later on this year, so I hope you all look forward to that. And if you've noticed, over here in the background on all my videos, this is actually a Illusion of Time framed poster that I got off Reddit, so I absolutely love the game and I'm really happy to finally get the Japanese version of it. And there are actually a few differences between this and the PAL version that came out here in the UK. Mainly there's a few changes to the way the bosses are designed, and it has a different title screen, which is kind of interesting, so I was very happy to get this. And the other thing I absolutely love about this version of the game is the fact that on the back of the box it actually has photos of the developers from the game, and in the instruction manual it actually has photos from the different areas that they used for inspiration in the levels themselves. So there's a lot of really nice attention to detail that went into this package, and I'm definitely going to be covering it a lot more in the future, so I really hope you look forward to that. The second game here, this is part of the Shockman series, or the Shubin Man series. This one is called Shubin Man 0, and the thing that's really interesting about this game is the fact that it was actually only officially released on cartridge 3 years ago in 2017. It was re-released by a company called Columbus Circle, who specialise in re-releasing homebrew and Satellaview games in this case. So I was really excited to get this. I now have all of the games in the Shubin Man series. The other three, if you didn't know, came out on the PC Engine, and I did talk about them on my PC Engine pickups video, which I'll put a link to in the description as well. This game is quite different to them. It's a lot more based on melee combat rather than shooting. Basically, it's a platformer. A lot of people compare it to Mega Man, but it's not really that similar to Mega Man. It's just a really fun game. It is very simple, but that's part of its charm, and I really have been enjoying playing this a lot, and it's just really cool that it actually got a physical release. And they did a great job with the box and the manual as well, which I'm sure you will agree looks amazing. So this third game here is called Jerry Boy, and this one is really interesting. If the box art looks familiar to you, that's because it was actually drawn by Ken Sugimori, who is most well known as the artist for the Pokemon series. So it's really interesting to get one of the other games that he worked on. The game itself is a fairly basic platformer where you play as this little blob of jelly. I presume that the English name was supposed to be Jelly Boy, but bad translations or not understanding the translation, it ended up being called Jerry Boy. In America it's called Smart Ball, I think, which kind of makes a bit more sense. But the game itself is really fun, if incredibly simple. I like the fact that you can stick to the walls and move up and down that way as well. And just like Plock or any of those kind of games, you have to collect the letters that spell out Jerry, and that gives you an extra life at the end of the stage. It's a really simple game, but it's really fun. The graphics are nice and colourful. But the main reason I wanted this was just for the artwork. And in the manual as well, it actually has some more Ken Sugimori artwork as well. So really interesting game from that point of view alone. Now, I'm a huge fan of the company Famicom. They made some of my favourite RPGs. So I was on the lookout for some of their earlier titles, and I picked this one up here. This is called Popful Mail. It did come out in English on the Sega CD, or the Mega CD here in the UK. I don't think it actually got a UK release, but this is the Super Famicom version of Popful Mail. A really cute and colourful RPG style platformer, kind of similar to the Wonder Boy and Monster World games. It plays really well. Unfortunately, I haven't managed to find a translation patch yet, so I haven't been able to get very far into it, but it's a really interesting game, and I would love at one point in the future to make a video about Famicom as a developer as well, because they have a really fascinating history, and they've gone on to become one of the biggest developers in the RPG scene today. So it was really cool to be able to find this game from them, and it's in really nice condition as well, and I just love the box art, and I also love the art in the manual as well. I really do I think they put so much effort into the presentation of these games that you just don't get anymore, and I really, really enjoy that from these releases. That's why I try and get as many boxed games as I can. Now this next one here is by Squaresoft, before they became Square Enix, and it's called Bahamut Lagoon. And this one actually never got an official release in the West, but there is a fan translation online. The graphics in this game are absolutely incredible for the SNES. I really think they pushed the system to its limit. I also love the box art and the manual art, like I said about all of these games. I like the fact that it's landscape rather than portrait as well, like a lot of the SNES games. It really makes it stand out on the shelf. I really, really do like what they did there. The game itself is really interesting as well. It's actually a turn-based strategy RPG, which I didn't actually know going into it, so that was quite a nice surprise. I like the pacing of the game, I like the graphics and the art style. I really like the game as a whole, and I'm definitely going to put some more time into it in the future. Now, if you saw my Famicom pickups video that I did a few weeks ago, you might remember that I showed this game off here, which is called Hebereke. It's a really cute and colourful 2D platformer for the Famicom, and it got a release on the NES in the UK and America called Euphoria, I believe. But what I didn't know until I went to Japan, and was very glad that I found this out while I was there, Hebereke actually is a whole series of games. And I managed to find 3 games in that series on the Super Famicom, and I was very surprised when I got back home to find out that they're not platformers at all. When I went there, I didn't really research the games at all. I just thought they were like 16-bit versions of the Famicom game, but these 3 games here are all completely different, and that's really interesting to me. So I'll try and remember which one's which. This one, I don't know the names of them because it's all in Japanese obviously, so I'll put the name on the screen. This one is actually an isometric racing game. Yeah, a racing game. I really wasn't expecting that. The graphics are incredibly good for the Super Famicom. They're really, really nice and colourful. The only thing that lets this game down for me is the controls. They're kind of strange. To turn, you sort of have to look from the point of view of the character rather than the screen, so it's a little bit hard to get used to, but once you do, it becomes quite a fun and interesting game. So that is the Hebereke racing game, whatever that's called. Now this next one is something else. This one is a fighting game. It actually plays very similarly to something like Smash Brothers, or maybe something like Power Stone on the Dreamcast, but it's from a top-down 2D point of view. It's a really interesting game, and I imagine this one's a lot of fun in multiplayer. I haven't played it that much. I wasn't quite sure about the controls on this one. I just seemed to win by mashing buttons, but I'm sure there's some sort of combo system or something to go along with it, so that's really interesting as well. And the last one here, and the one that I've put the most time into so far, and the one that I've enjoyed the most, is kind of like a Puyo Puyo or Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine Kirby's Avalanche style game, where you basically have to make the colour combinations as they're dropping down the screen. There's a few different things that happen with this one. You don't just have to line up 3 of the same colour, they have to be in an actual line, kind of like columns. And if you line them up in a 3 or a 4, the one in the middle explodes, and that can get rid of some of the other stuff. There's also a weird colour combination system, and there's power-ups and things. So it's a really interesting take on that style of puzzle game, so I'd really recommend this one. Now if you saw my Sega Saturn pickups video, you might remember that I showed off a little tip where if you turn the box round you can find out what the game's called in English. Well, you can kind of do the same thing on Super Famicom games. I picked this game up here, really, really cheap from one of the many book-off stores that I visited, but as you can see, if I focus on that there, that the game's entirely in Japanese, and I had absolutely no idea what it was called. But if you can see in the corner there, there's a little sort of code that's split up into 3 sets of letters. If you actually type that into Google, it will actually tell you the name of the game. It's kind of like a unique identifier. So by typing this into Google, I actually found out that this game is called Drift King Shotoku Battle 2. And that's just a really easy way of finding out what games are called if all you've got to go on is the label or the box art and there's no English on it. If you just get your phone out and type in the code on the side, I presume it's on the back of the boxes as well, I haven't actually looked. Yeah, so there you go. So on the side of the box as well, if you look underneath where it says Super Famicom, you'll have that code there as well. So if you type that in on Google, you'll be able to find out what the game's called. And it's in different places on the different boxes, like that one's down there on the corner. or that one's on the side, but it'll definitely be on there somewhere. So the game itself is actually surprisingly good, a lot better than I thought it would be. It's a Mode 7 style racer with a story mode. I couldn't find a translation patch, so the story mode's kind of lost on me, but the main thing that matters is the gameplay, and I was pleasantly surprised by this. I think it actually controls really well, and the graphics actually look really good as well, considering they're just Mode 7. So considering this was only about 100 yen, which is like 50p, my enjoyment for this game more than makes up for the fact that I just picked this one up on a whim. So I definitely recommend this one if you're on the lookout for some more obscure Super Famicom games. Highly recommended. This is another one that I picked up super cheap from Book Off. This one is called Bomberman Be Da Man. And unlike a lot of the Bomberman games on the SNES, and there are a lot of them, this one actually plays kind of differently. This one is more of a weird dodgeball style game with weird explosive puzzles. It's really strange, it's really hard to explain, so hopefully the gameplay that I've put over the screen here gives you kind of an idea of what to expect. If you go into this expecting a Bomberman game, you're going to be very disappointed. And the game itself isn't really that good either, but it was incredibly cheap, so can't really complain too much, and it was quite interesting to see that there is such a different, weird version of Bomberman that's out there. And I think there is actually other Bomberman Be Da Man games as well. I think I've actually got a few on the Game Boy Color, so I might try and dig them out and see if they play the same as this. So kind of a weird one. The next one here probably doesn't really need much of an introduction. It's one of my favourite games on the SNES, and I found this one in Book Off as well, incredibly cheap, so I had to pick it up when I saw it. This is the Japanese version of Goemon. Don't really have much to say about this one. It's available in English, so I definitely recommend going and getting it. It's a fantastic game. In Japan there were actually 2 sequels on the Super Famicom, which I was really hoping to find, but unfortunately I didn't find them for a good price at least anyway. But I picked the first one up, and I would love to eventually get the other games in the series. The third one actually recently got a fan translation, so I would love to pick that up soon. But I definitely recommend the series, it's really fun. This next one is a really interesting game. I can't remember where I heard about it from though, but I remember thinking that it was a really interesting sounding game. It might have been from one of SNES Drunk's videos. He's one of my favourite channels here on YouTube. Highly recommend it if you're into SNES games. His SNES recommendations videos have just given me so many games that I really want to play, and I think this was one of them. It's called Ihatavo Monogatari, and it's a really simple RPG. It doesn't have any fighting mechanics or anything. It's just a very atmospheric, story-driven game, and I just love that idea. It's kind of like a proto To the Moon style game, but on the SNES, and I just love that. It does have a fan translation, and I'm definitely going to download it and play through this at some point in the future. While I was recording it for this video, obviously it's all in Japanese, but have a look online and you can actually download a translation patch for it. And if you want to find out about how to use these translation patches, one of the ways you can do it is through a console called the Retro Freak. And I actually did a video review on the Retro Freak a few years ago, and I talked through how to apply the translation patches and stuff, so I'll put a link to that video in the description, so if you are tempted to collect for the Super Famicom, that is an option to play these games in English. Only 3 more games now. I know this has gone on quite long, so I won't keep you guys much longer, mostly because this one I haven't really played much more than just a few minutes on the opening screen. The main thing I love about this game is called Albert Odyssey, and the reason I've been so interested in this game for so long is the graphics. I just think they look really nice big sprites, and it looks like it will be a really fun adventure as well. So it's another one that I'm going to try and download a translation patch for in the future. So now on the last game here, this one is Tokimeki Memorial. And I didn't actually pick this one up while I was in Japan. I actually ordered this one off Amazon when I got back home. This one I picked up because I was really hoping there would be a translation patch for it. But unfortunately, I found out online that it's actually been extremely difficult for people to try and translate it. So sadly, I don't think I'll actually be able to play this anytime soon. And the whole reason I picked this one up is because if you saw in a previous video, I actually picked this wireless charging mat up from a pop-up Konami store that was in Akihabara, and I'd never actually played any of the Tokimeki Memorial games before, so I figured I would try and pick one up that I might have the possibility of playing in English, just so I could say that I've actually played them, because it does seem like a really good series. But unfortunately that's not the case. And one last really cool thing before I end this video. I picked this up from the amazing game shop called Friends in Akihabara. This is the official Super Game Boy 2 Game Boy controller for the SNES. And it was something that I actually saw the first time I was in Japan, but I'd run out of money, so I didn't manage to get it then. But 4 years later, I finally have my own version of this controller, and it is really, really cool. It has special functions if you're playing it on the Super Game Boy itself. As you can see, there's a switch in the middle that lets you switch it from Super Game Boy to Super Famicom. And if you're playing Famicom games, it's actually quite nice to hold as well. And it has that normal diamond shape configuration, but it also has the Game Boy style A and B buttons there. So it really does feel like you're playing on the Game Boy and on the SNES, depending on what you're using it for. So I really do like this controller, and I've actually been using it as my regular SNES controller since I picked it up. So there we go, that was all my Super Famicom pickups. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I've still got quite a few more pickups videos to do, so that's going to be lasting me another few weeks at least, so I really hope you're enjoying these. And then I've got some really, really cool videos that I've got planned later in the year. I hope you're all really doing well in quarantine and lockdown. Fingers crossed it doesn't last much longer. It's been about 2 weeks now, and we're all slowly going a little bit insane, so hopefully my YouTube videos are helping with that slightly anyway. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what your favourite pickups were from this episode. Let me know some of your favourite Super Famicom games. Maybe you can recommend some games to me. But that's it for this time. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next week for the next episode. Goodbye!